Okay, today we're looking at quadratic equations of the form ax squared equals c. A quadratic equation is an equation in which the highest power of the variable is 2. For example, x squared equals 4, 2x squared equals 18, and x squared minus 2x equals 8. Okay, we're only going to be looking at ones like x squared equals 4 and 2x squared equals 18. The inverse operation to squaring is square rooting. Okay, when we were looking at the linear functions, linear equations, we had opposite operations, multiplication and division, addition and subtraction. But now that we have x squared, we have a power in here, we need to be able to get rid of that squared. And we do that by performing opposite operations. So the opposite operation of squaring something is taking the square root. Okay, if x squared equals c, then x equals plus or minus the square root of c, provided c is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, that looks like a bit of mumbo jumbo there. But let's say c is 16. Okay, so 16 is greater than or equal to 0, so we're going to go with 16. So x squared equals 16. What solutions can we have for that? Okay, what number squared gives me 16? First one that comes to mind is 4. But if we think a little bit deeper, we also know that minus 4 times minus 4 is 16 also. So we have two things that if we square them, two numbers that we square them, it gives us 16. We have plus 4 and minus 4. That's where this symbol comes in, and the examples will go through and show that a bit clearer. Okay, if x squared equals c and c is less than 0, there are no possible solutions. Now what does this mean? C is less than 0, so this c means it has to be a negative number. So x squared equals, let's say, minus 9. So if you've got minus 9, are there any numbers that you can think that you square and you'll get a negative number to get negative 9? Okay, that's something to think about. Okay. Is there the number? No, there's not, but we'll talk about that later on as well. Okay, first example, solve. X squared equals 36. So taking the opposite operation of both sides, we're going to take the square root. So the square root of x squared is x, square root of 36. Also, not forgetting that, we do need to have this plus or minus sign in, and that's what we had before. Plus or minus, because thinking about this one, we have x equals plus or minus 6, 6 squared equals 36, and minus 6 squared equals 36. That's where that symbol comes in. Now that symbol there, it must be written in that fashion. You don't put the minus sign above it. The plus is always on top. Okay, let's look at the next example. 2x squared equals 50. Now remember, when we're solving equations, we want the pronumeral on the left-hand side all by itself. So we can't touch the power first, we need to get rid of this 2 first. So opposite of timesing by 2 is dividing by 2. So let's divide both sides by 2 and we end up with x squared equals 25. Okay, taking the square root of both sides, we have x equals, don't forget the plus or minus, the square root of 25. So x equals plus or minus 5. I'd like you to pause there, get the examples down in your book. Please press play when you're ready to go on. Okay, example 2. X squared minus 100 equals 0. Okay, it doesn't look like the form ax squared equals c that we talked about earlier, but if we do some manipulation, we can get that to look the same. So we want the x squared by itself. So let's get rid of this 100. So the opposite of adding 100 is subtracting 100 is adding 100. So we'll add 100 to both sides. So we have x squared equals 100. Taking the square root, I have x equals plus or minus the square root of 100. So we have x equals plus or minus the square root of 10. Next example. X squared plus 7 equals 0. Again, we need to get the x ultimately by itself. So we'll get rid of this 7 first by subtracting 7 from both sides. We have x squared equals minus 7. Okay, back to the thing where we had x squared equals c, but c has to be greater than or equal to 0. This is not greater than or equal to 0. So let's think about it. Is there a number that you can find that you square that will give me negative 7? There's not. Okay, this needs to be a positive number, otherwise there are no real solutions. So any quadratic equation that comes up x squared equals a negative, and it doesn't matter what number is in here, there is no real solution. This symbol's therefore if you haven't seen it before. Now your answer to this question is not leaving it as this or saying x equals 0 or x equals nothing like that. It has to have therefore no real solution. This is the answer that we will be looking for. Okay, I'd like you to pause there, write the examples down, press play when you're ready to go, and we'll do the last example. Okay, example 3, solve. Show your answer in exact form or surd form. They can be asked either way and they mean the same thing. So what we're going to do, the surd is just that square root symbol. We're going to leave it in that square root sign. So looking at this one, I have 13 minus x squared equals 3, provided x is less than 0. So they're giving us a stipulation on this, okay? So when we solve that, we need to get the x by itself. So we're going to get rid of this constant first by subtracting 13 to both sides. So I end up with minus x squared equals minus 10. Okay, I'm going to multiply both sides by minus 1 to end up with x squared equals 10. Now taking the square root of both sides, I have x equals plus or minus the square root of 10. However, our answer says x must be less than 0, so therefore x equals minus 10 since x is less than 0. This is your final answer. It's saying that the solution to this is x equals plus or minus 10 without this stipulation, but when you bring that in, we get our answer x equals minus 10, square root of 10. Now, leaving it in exact form, square root of 10, there's no number that we can multiply by itself to give 10. So when we do that on a calculator, we'll end up with a decimal. We'll end up with 3 point something. It's not an exact answer. So this is what we actually call a surd. It's a number that we can't get a whole number when we take the square root of. So leaving it in exact form or surd form, whichever way they ask, means just leaving it in surd form, leaving it with a square root sign. So your answer is therefore x equals minus square root of 10 since x is less than 0. I'd like you to get that example down, please, in your book. Any problems with anything on this video, make sure you ask the teacher in class, and thank you.